he's up there. But the leading scorer in the country is at Marquette, and he's only 5'11". Now, Marquette has some work to do just to get into the tournament. They've kind of been stumbling lately, but Marcus Howard is a player to watch if they get there. Marcus Howard is averaging 28 points per game. If he gets rolling, he can light up the scoreboard. And when he does, all of a sudden, Marquette suddenly becomes a pain because he just can shoot from anywhere. If Marquette makes it, you have to watch Marcus Howard. I know a lot of times as coaches, we would say, yeah, give that kid a green light. He can shoot it. I'm telling you, Marcus Howard has 2 green lights just in case, I don't know, one burns out or something. He will fire it up from anywhere, and he is deadly. One final player that I would add on the list of players to watch as we go into the tournament. And I'm actually going to go to the Big Ten. Yes, I like Cassius Winston at Michigan State. Although, one quick side note, why is it still the Big Ten? And I'm sorry to go on these kind of side tangents, but there's like 14 teams in that conference. Can we change it to the Big 14 or something? Because it's not the Big 10 anymore. That conference hasn't had 10 teams in years. Go ahead and switch that up. Anyway, I know Maryland and Michigan State and Wisconsin are getting all the headlines. I still kind of like Iowa, but if you haven't seen big man Luke Garza, he is going to be a handful in the tournament. Luke Garza is 6'11". He's putting up 24 points and 10 rebounds a game. And at that level, it's really hard to find guys that are big enough to guard him. You don't get a ton of time to prep for what is basically a 7-footer. Luke Garza might be a name that everyone ends up knowing by the end of this tournament. A couple other things we want to look at as we go into the tournament. You know, every single season, we see a team come out of nowhere and just make serious noise in this tournament. What do? They bust up your bracket. They leave you cussing. You're tearing up that stupid printout and you're throwing it in the trash can. But what if? Just what if we could give you a few ideas about a couple of teams to kind of keep an eye on? Like, what if the Daly Dose could sniff out a few of those under the radar teams before the brackets were even released? Well, that is what we're going to try to do right now, my friends. Here are some under the radar teams that if you're not careful, they just might bust up your brackets. Keep these teams in mind. Let's start with the Mountain West tournament champion Utah State Aggies. I know it's the Mountain West. I get that. We're kind of used to scoffing at that conference, well, for most of everything. But the Mountain West actually has some pretty decent basketball talent. San Diego State is probably going to be a 2 seed, and Utah State beat them for that tournament championship. If you haven't seen Utah State play, I'm telling you, they are tough. They've got a kid on that team named Sam Merrill. Sam Merrill could easily be on our list of top players to watch. Kid is scoring 20 points a game. Utah State can play very, very well at both ends. And Merrill is that kind of kid. He will just will his team to win a few games in that dance. Utah State has toughness. Their offense has a ton of flow. They've got shooters. If you see Utah State, they just might be a dangerous team. They could break up your bracket because they just might be that Cinderella team. Next team up, and they don't have a big name, but you might want to keep an eye on where the Akron Zips end up in the NCAA bracket. Hey, I realize the conference they play in, the MAC, it's not the toughest conference in the country, but the Akron Zips have been tested and they have won 8 of their last 9 games. Here's the thing that I really like about Akron though. They've got really good guards. They have a great set of guards that could be a major problem in the tournament. They've got Lauren Christian Jackson and Tyler Cheese. And if Akron plays well defensively, you could be in for a tough night because they score points. Those 2 guards can dictate tempo. You could end up with a handful if you're playing the Akron Zips. Be careful. They can shoot it. They can fill it up. Maybe they don't play that hard on defense all the time, but if they do, you might get yourself in a dogfight that you never expected. Because in that first round, you were like, oh, we got Akron. We got an easy game first round up. Yeah, it might not go exactly like that. Be careful if you see the Akron Zips. Another team on our list of, kind of Cinderella bracket busters to keep an eye on. The Liberty Flames, they could definitely be a Cinderella in this year's tournament because here's the thing. This team is not the young freshman or sophomore team. This is a group of veterans. They're not going to get rattled by the pressure of playing in the NCAA tournament. Liberty is coached by longtime Tony Bennett assistant Richie McKay, And they kind of bring that same kind of Virginia mentality of just locking you down defensively. You're not going to score the number of points that you're used to. Not tonight. Not against Liberty. The Liberty Flames allow just 53 points per game, and they generate a ton of points from your turnovers because they do play such tenacious defense. They are going to frustrate you. They are going to smother you. You're going to feel a little bit off when you play Liberty. Hey, Liberty has won 30 games this year. And remember this, like I said about them not being rattled, the tournament not being too big for them. Remember this, the Liberty Flames were the 12 seed last year. In the first round, they knocked off number 5 Mississippi State. I guarantee you, Liberty wants more this season. Kind of keep an eye out for those Liberty Flames. Our final team is not the little, no-name team. It's not a team that you're not going to recognize. They play in a smaller conference, but it's a conference that has way more talent than people might think. But the Houston Cougars finished the season on top of the American Athletic Conference. I mean, you hear that and you say, well, that's not that big of a deal. Who cares? Until you realize, you look a little bit closer at that conference and you realize that Houston had to beat out teams like Cincinnati, who's very solid. Tulsa, very tough. Wichita State, we know how tough the Shockers can be. And Memphis, who is trying to play their way into the tournament. All of those teams have a chance to get into the dance this year. Now, I know down at Houston, Kelvin Sampson's group could end up having to vacate the wins that they, might get, because we kind of know how Kelvin Sampson works. I mean, you just never know with him, but Houston is another very talented team. They just lock you up defensively. They don't let you breathe for 40 minutes. If you draw Houston early in the tournament, and I would expect they're probably going to be like a 6, 7, 8 kind of seed. So you kind of sleep on a team like Houston. Be very, very careful of the Houston Cougars. They definitely could be a bracket buster. Don't let it happen to you. But not only do we want to give you a few under the radar teams, we also want to give you some teams. I'm not saying they're not going to win. I'm not going to say they can't win. I'm just going to say you better be very, very cautious with these 4 teams. Some of them are among the top teams in the country, but I'm telling you, they have some flaws. Don't be surprised if they bow out early to a Cinderella, maybe a little bit earlier than we expected. Hey, bet on them if you want, but do so cautiously. And first up, I hate to do this. I know I'm going to get some hate, but I have to nominate the Duke Blue Devils. Hey, make no mistake, Duke can beat you in a few ways. That is a very talented team. There are times that Duke has looked like maybe they're going to end up being the great team. Sometimes they can shoot it. Defensively, early on, they looked really, really good. But here's the weird thing. They can find ways to lose. They can lose in a few different ways. Sometimes they just go ice cold and can't shoot it at all. Sometimes we see dominant big man Vernon Carey Jr. just get into foul trouble and then they lose their inside presence. And sometimes their defense looks very, very average. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm telling you right now, if this wasn't a Coach K coach team, I think we'd all be looking at it going, Duke doesn't look that very well coached. What is going on? And Coach K, by the way, his body language also tells me we should worry a little bit about Duke because Coach K is grumpy. Really grumpy. He's yelling at the Duke students. He's telling people, if you want to criticize us, just go look at the banners. But I mean, when you think about it, Coach K, he kind of fools us, doesn't he? Because he has all that fake jet black hair, but you kind of forget Mike Krzyzewski is almost 75 years old. At 75, do you want to be dealing with 18-year-olds that are whining all the time and telling you what to do? No, me either. Coach K is grumpy. I would be cautious with Duke. Another team I would kind of be careful about. They went on an amazing run last year, and maybe they have another run in them again this season. But the Auburn Tigers are struggling this year when they play good competition. When they play the bad teams, they look great. But when they play good teams, they struggle. And that is bad news in a 6-game tournament when you are going to be playing, the top teams in the country. If they shoot the ball well, Auburn can play with anyone. Just don't have a cold shooting night. Because if they do, they can also lose to anyone. I won't be surprised to see Auburn get a 5 seed and then face a really tough 12 seed. And if so, Auburn could be in some serious trouble. Another team that is a top team in the country, but they have shown a lot of inconsistency, and that would make me very, very nervous, and that is the Maryland Terrapins. Yes, Mark Turgeon is an excellent coach. I get all that. They're probably going to get like a 3 or a 4 seed. But Maryland, they're really struggling to run teams off the 3-point line. For some reason, maybe it's just a wacky coincidence, every team that plays Maryland suddenly finds their 3-point stroke. And if you get into a game with a sharpshooting team, yeah, you might be in a little bit of trouble. I know the Big Ten is always a tough conference, but think about it this year. This season, it's not a great shooting conference. So if you're giving up good shooting, maybe you don't notice it in the Big Ten, but against other teams, yeah, you might notice it a lot. Maryland could be in a little bit of trouble defensively, and the last team that I will put on my list of teams, I'm not saying not to pick them, I'm just saying be cautious about it. I know that the Kentucky Wildcats are starting to feel it lately. They're starting to win some games down the stretch, and their fans are yelling racial slurs like it's the 1800s. So hey, Wildcats fans have to be feeling like it's the glory days again. And they can be very good. That is a talented group at Kentucky. They could be very dangerous. But I'm also seeing some things that do scare me. For one, starting point guard Ashton Higgins is taking some time off from the team because they say he's in a bad way. I don't know what that means. I hope the kid's okay. But this is March Madness and they desperately need him. Also, Kentucky at times struggles to defend without fouling their opponents. That's a bad sign. Plus, doesn't it kind of seem like right now it's really, really quiet around John Calipari? Like we hear about Louisville, we hear about Kansas, we hear about Arizona. We're not hearing much about Kentucky and Calipari. It's like the lull before the storm. We know a storm always follows John Calipari. I'm a little bit skeptical about the Kentucky Wildcats. Okay, coming back, we still have a few more things to look for as March Madness is coming quickly. I mean, are there any teams out there that could surprise us? And what teams should you dread seeing in your quadrant of the bracket? They could keep you up late at night. Plus, we still have to get to our Daily Dose Top 5. College hoops is finishing up. We are looking a lot at the tournament today, but today our Daily Dose Top 5 is also going to look at a different type of success in college basketball. So let's continue our early March Madness preview. Yes, I know the brackets haven't even come out yet, but we want to try to help you when they do so that you are ready to win that office pool. We know there is nothing better than office pool bragging rights, Daily Dose office pool bragging rights. Whatever you can win is the better. You want to make sure you take care of those brackets. One thing I think you have to try to rate into the equation when you are making your picks is which coaches are out there that are capable of raising their team's play just purely by their coaching ability. And I know a lot of times, especially the experts, they'll always say, well, coaching doesn't really matter that much. You got to have players, and you 100% do have to have players. But then why do we see some of the best coaches just win every single year? It happens every year. Why are they always so good? It's not just name recognition. They're doing something right. I have 4 coaches, might not have the most loaded teams, but I am always very wary about going against them, and I would be a little bit nervous to put down the other team on the line this year. No, their teams aren't great, but they are very, very good coaches. I will start with a guy that has won 2 titles now, and while I'm not sure if Villanova is truly capable of winning another one this season, they've got some size. Head coach Jay Wright, he is getting his Villanova Wildcats to play defense much, much better. And as a result, they are a team that can win ugly if they have to. Yes, they struggle at times to shoot the ball, and that is a major concern. But what if Jay Wright can figure out how to manufacture points? Villanova could be a little bit tougher than expected. I'm not saying I wouldn't pick against Nova, but like with Jay Wright, I kind of go, I don't know. Like it makes me a little bit nervous to do so. Villanova might be a pain. The next coach I have has a team that is talented enough to literally win the whole thing, but I'm telling you, it is their coach that has built this program the way that he has. Do not sleep on Leonard Hamilton down at Florida State. Florida State can play with anyone. But what I really like about them, what could separate them from the pack, is just the toughness that Leonard Hamilton forces his teams to play with. It's kind of crazy to think about. But Florida State has made it at least to the Sweet 16 in each of the past 3 seasons. They could go further than that this year. They could go to the Final Four this year. They could win it all this year. Leonard Hamilton coaches tough basketball. For that reason, I'm going to have a tough time picking against Florida State. Next team up, I'm not liking how they're playing. I'm really not. They're stumbling into the tournament. But after seeing the job he did last year,